Imagine if you did not need to consume food. What would you do with all the time that would otherwise be spent shopping at the grocery store, chopping and prepping food, cooking it, and preparing a meal for yourself or others? I like to think that I would spend more time drawing comics, but who knows? It's a non-issue because humans, like all animals, lack the ability to photosynthesize. It's a superpower that is found within the plants and some specialized bacteria and protists. For this first introduction to photosynthesis, I'm going to frame this all in the context of plants since they're the most familiar. If you have a lawn, and you're the one in your family that has to mow it, you've noticed that grass seems to grow without the plant doing much of anything. As long as it's not too hot or too cold, and as long as you provide good soil and water, the grass grows and you have to mow it down or your family complains. The grass is building tissue and getting taller somehow, but where does that material come from? That growth is the result of photosynthesis. For photosynthesis to occur, your grass has some requirements. Most plants have roots that penetrate through the soil. It's in this soil that a plant can access water and minerals. Water, as you'll see, is a required input for photosynthesis. Those minerals play a less obvious but equally important role. Much like you need minerals to survive, plants need them to build proteins and function correctly. From the air, plants will source carbon dioxide, which enters through specialized pores called stomata. However, you can't just mix water and carbon dioxide together and toss some minerals in to help for photosynthesis to occur. You need to add a power source to fuel this reaction, and that power source comes in the form of solar energy or light. That solar energy is traveling from the sun to the plant in the form of photons, which are elementary particles that have the ability to transfer solar energy to the plant. Using the energy from these photons, plants have the ability to convert carbon dioxide and water into sugar. This is oversimplifying a little bit, but that sugar will eventually be in the form of glucose. And this is really why we call plants producers and animals consumers. Plants can form glucose from materials that are freely available in the air and soil. They don't need to eat it the way consumers like us do. We need to consume glucose or break down more complex carbohydrates to glucose in our digestive systems to fuel our cellular activities. Plants can make their own glucose. Once it has that glucose, a plant can do a variety of things with it. First of all, it can send that glucose onto the mitochondria to make adenosine triphosphate, or ATP. Students often forget that plant cells have mitochondria. Much like us, they still need to convert that glucose to ATP for the cell to use. Plants can also join glucose molecules together and store it as starch, like in a potato plant. Alternatively, glucose can be linked together to form the structural complex carbohydrate cellulose and build more plant tissue. And this is how the grass in your yard seemingly grows to mowing height overnight. Now that we've laid the basics down, we can talk about the chemistry behind photosynthesis and introduce the basic equation to get one molecule of glucose. Your inputs or reactants are 6 molecules of carbon dioxide and 6 molecules of water. The carbon dioxide enters through the stomata and the water enters through the roots. The process of photosynthesis will transform these reactants into 1 molecule of glucose, which is 6 atoms of carbon, 12 atoms of hydrogen, and 6 atoms of oxygen. As an additional bonus, you'll get some oxygen gas, which will largely diffuse out of the plant and help consumers like us to survive. Thanks, plants! Conversely, we breathe out the carbon dioxide they need, so it's a nice balance. This equation makes photosynthesis seem simple, but a lot is hidden in that arrow, the most important items being the solar energy and the molecules called pigments. Pigments are the only molecules in the plant that can actually interface and accept photons. Plants need to overcome a massive challenge. Only one tiny component of their entire structure can actually access and accept energy from the sun in the form of photons. These are the pigment molecules, with one of the most obvious ones being the chlorophyll that gives plants their green coloration. Once that energy is obtained by pigments, how does a plant actually use it to convert carbon dioxide and water to make glucose? It's the equivalent of you finding a pirate's treasure chest, but having no way to convert that gold to modern currency. Here's how plants are going to convert that solar energy into a usable form so that it goes beyond just the pigments. Photosynthesis is going to be broken down into 2 steps that are linked together by rechargeable batteries. First, you have the light reaction. The light reaction is named that way because it's the part of photosynthesis that first addresses the photon pigment challenge. Solar energy will be captured by pigments like chlorophyll, but then a set of energy transfers will occur to pass that solar energy to electrons, which do the work of charging our molecular batteries. In that way, solar energy doesn't just stop at the pigments, but can be used to power the next reaction. In the Calvin cycle, we use our charged molecular batteries to actually convert carbon dioxide into glucose by going through the Calvin cycle a few times. This step is only possible because we converted light energy into molecular energy during the light reaction. By the end of the Calvin cycle, we've actually depleted our molecular batteries. Luckily, they can hop back over to the light reaction to pick up more solar juice and be shuttled back to the Calvin cycle. To understand the location of photosynthesis, let's look at the leaves of a plant. Leaves are basically giant sun-harvesting organs that have tons of stomata for letting in carbon dioxide and letting out oxygen. Leaves contain mesophyll cells, which are packed with chloroplasts, the organelle that allows photosynthesis to take place in plants. The chloroplast has an outer and inner membrane, and if you were to cut one open, you'll find a liquidy goop known as the stroma. This stroma is full of enzymes, and it's the site of the Calvin cycle. You would also find stacks of flattened, pancake-like structures. Each stack is known as a granum, and the individual discs that make up the stacks are known as thylakoids. These thylakoids will be the site of the light reaction. That's it for a basic overview of photosynthesis. In the next video, I'll dive into those thylakoids and show you the process of capturing solar energy and converting it to the charged molecular batteries.